How to talk to conspiracy theorists. Well, the first thing is, conspiracy theorists, I find, don't usually out themselves because they're kind of, everybody knows they're crazy and dumb and selfish and, so they're not going to immediately out themselves. But you can usually detect one because what they do is they, you'll be talking about how excited you are to get a vaccine and how you have your outfit picked out and you'll be so excited, like a normal person that's just like, yes, we're finally getting back to normal, we're getting vaccinated and things are just, and you're excited and you're talking like that's normal. And they say something like, oh, I'm going to wait and see because this was a rushed vaccine and I want to kind of weigh my options. They'll say something like, they'll have this strange, what's been notified by me is what's called vaccine hesitancy, which is a subgroup of anti-vaxxers, which, as you know from these labels, that means they are dumb, evil, dangerous, weird people. Ooh, watch out, that's an unsafe person. And so when they express that, I'll then say, wait, are you an anti-vaxxer? And then a conspiracy theorist will even if they aren't technically an anti-vaxxer, they will say, oh no, it's just about this vaccine and this particular disease. They'll say, well, I just thought everything that's been going on in 2020 has been kind of this totalitarian tiptoe. They love to use words like totalitarian and authoritarian and collectivism and communism, and they just it's like, I'm sorry, but could you just talk about the word that I know, and that's fascism, and that's Hitler, and that's far right. And it's like when people try to talk about if the far left is like the far right, and they try to have this big thing about collectivism, I just get so bored. It's like that time I tried to read an Ayn Rand book in high school, and I just found this girl that I could mooch off of she could write the book report for me, because I was like, I don't want to read this 1,000-page book in size 10 font that's all of this let's talk about communism, collectivism, individualism. I just got so bored, and I was like, this keeps telling me stuff about the Russian Revolution that I never learned in school, and I just don't care. I don't care. I'm not told that it's evil, and I don't want to know. So, and also, it's just such horrible social collateral, because when you read Ayn Rand, nobody likes you. You learn that quickly. Teachers will be like, what are you doing? And then your students would be like, oh, you're a selfish idiot. So, that's what I hear when people start using those words. Authoritarianism, it's so much. And so they love to use that, and they think that, they have this idea that there's been a government overreach, because this is the first time that the government said, close your small businesses, lock down, and don't go to restaurants, don't meet in groups of 10, beyond 10, and 6 feet distance. And they have this kind of whole idea in their head that this is not for our health and safety. They have this idea that this is it's a scary secret predator. I'm like, why would the government care about me? I'm not who cares? They're not going to track us. They're already tracking us with their phone, is what I usually say to conspiracy theorist. Because in the conversation, usually, of course, they'll bring up that totalitarian and that. And then I'll say, of course, well, they're already tracking us, so they already have all our information. and then they'll say something like, but now this will be in our DNA. It'll be inside us. And I'm like, who cares? If you're not doing anything wrong and you're like following the rules, then who cares if there's like something in your DNA? Like, just go with it. Be safe. Be with the crowd and just go with what you're told. That's what the rules are. It's like, honestly, that's why I think conspiracy theorists, I don't even know if they got through the public school system, because you learn how to memorize and follow rules. I mean, these guys must be like C students. It's like they just lack that reflexive obedience that we know is virtuous, we know is smart. Valedictorians, they're good rule followers. Anyway, then we get into it, and then of course, like, a conspiracy theorist is going to bring up, like, that small businesses, have closed, and it's like, of course, but like, we acknowledge that it's just temporary, and then they'll talk about how Costco and Target and Amazon are like, they're growing and getting richer during this time, and all of the middle class is being eradicated, and I'm like, it's just temporary. Like, the only reason why it's extended is because people aren't wearing masks, and it's like, the blame is on the people. Like, it's on the people, actually, like you conspiracy theorists who have your mask below your nose, or who is not wearing a mask. It's those people that are ruining it for us. And then they'll say, well, actually, conspiracy theorists don't get tested, so actually only the people getting tested are the cases, so it's the masked up people. And I just don't believe that, because I think that's just some ridiculous cop-out. So if the conversation keeps progressing, a lot of conspiracy theorists like to talk about the actual RT-PCR test that's used to test for COVID. And they'll say things like, that test is not a diagnostic test. They'll say that test is an amplification of whatever is currently in your body already. And anyway, honestly, when they start talking about that, I'm like, who researches and looks up this stuff? Like, it's the test. It's like, they'll say things like, this test, the creator of the test said this wasn't a diagnostic tool to measure viruses. And then I'll say, I don't care what you don't know the creator of the test, for what? You don't know him. You might have found some doctored information. It's just misinformation you're spreading. And then they'll say things like, well, this test is only able to be used in an emergency, when there's declared state of emergency, and they'll just have this whole story in their head. And I'm like, look, the test is the test. Like, I don't sit and I don't look up who invented it or what it does, or I just go with it. Like, put a cotton swab in my blood-brain barrier and tell me what to do. Just tell me what to do. I don't care about the details. I don't care about when people say, do your research. It's like, I do my research. And my research always collaborates with very convenient, simple slogans like, follow the experts, trust the experts, follow the science, 6 feet apart, mask over your nose. It's like, it's easy. Just follow the rules. They know best. They know best. And so then the conspiracy theorists will say things like, COVID hasn't been isolated as its own virus on a sample. And I'll be like, I don't know what that means. Do you think I care? Like, honestly, you're just talking gibberish to me. And that's why I say, I just get so upset, because it's like, how much time and like consideration will you give this until you just realize you're wrong? You're wrong. Why? Just because you're questioning something that is pretty. I always look at something and think, is the perceived predominance on my side? Looks like it, so I'm right. And all these little details, it's like, honestly, they're just looking for something to be wrong so they can have some weird dystopian worry. I mean, when you're not looking for problems, you won't find it. When you just follow the rules and do what you're told and just hope everything just gets back to normal and that these crazy people don't ruin it for the rest of us. I mean, that's usually how I think. And so conspiracy theorists have they have so much context and questions, and they go on, and then they'll talk, then they might get into, stuff about, they'd like to talk about the test, they like to talk, and then we'll finally get to something that I like to talk about, which is the masks. Because conspiracy theorists, they'll either say something like, look, I just don't want it to be mandated, I don't want to be told what to do, like, you can wear a mask, but I'm not going to do it. And I'm like, well, that's the point, is we all have to do it. We all have to do it to save ourselves, to protect each other. But they'll be like, oh, but I just don't want it to be mandated. And I'm like, honestly, why are you so against rules? Again, you're so against rules. Like, go be a rebel without a cause somewhere else, because I'm here to keep my neighbor safe. Like, I'm wearing this mask for you, bucko. You're wearing it, I guess not for me. But then they'll bring up stuff about like, oh, well, if your mouth and throat bacteria gets in your lungs, then you'll get some bacterial disease, respiratory thing. Then they'll act like Anthony Fauci wrote a paper on that. And I'm like, that's definitely misinformation. I would know what he wrote a paper on, because I would be told by the media. Ugh, so ridiculous. And they'll bring that up, and I'm just like, look, it's really simple. You just put the mask on. You keep the molecules out. We're all safe. But if you're just going to have all of this, like, looking for resistance, looking for ways to not follow the rules, well, it's just like those people in school, again, who couldn't just follow the rules. Ugh. So anyway, they have all kinds of just like, they'll even have this crazy thing about how like masks are like the ultimate like muzzle to keep free speech out. They love to talk about free speech, and I'm like, hate speech is not free speech, okay? And so like words are violence. That's the thing, is anything you say could inspire somebody to shoot or do any violence. Like, you could even say, I love everyone, and that could actually make somebody mad and do violence. And that's why, honestly, you should be muzzled. Everyone should be muzzled, because everyone's lived experience is different. Like, you never know if somebody heard somebody say, I love everyone, and that was actually a trigger for them, because in their family, like, that was what someone said right before like an assault. Sometimes people say I love everyone, and then it's like, that can be taken depending on the subjective experience of anybody. That could be a huge trigger for them. And so you have to just be, if you're silent, then you can't be violent, because you're not going to hurt anybody. You won't have any word that will hurt and cause somebody to think that they have to rise up in violence. And that's why, like, this talk about free speech, it's like, yeah, we know exactly what to say. You don't say anything. And they act like the mask is an extension of that. And I'm like, honestly, it has the thing about conspiracy theorists, is they're just so crazy. Like, they're so crazy, they don't follow rules, they're unsafe, they're dumb, so moronic, so selfish, so evil. And if you just come at it by assuming that they are all those things, it's really that's the only way you can get through the conversation, because they're just brainwashed. And you're just such a good person to even have the patience to like wade through all their talk when they're like totalitarianism, collectivism, authoritarianism. Like, ugh, you're so boring. Like, anyway, that's why, try not to talk to them, but usually the first sign is if they've got that that hesitancy. Anyone that hesitates and has this kind of deliberation about vaccines or lockdowns or any matter of it, of what's going on, I think, why are you not, why would you even stop and hesitate at all and think? And why, do you realize how dangerous and weird and like unsafe that is? Like, it's clear what we're supposed to do, just like go along to get along. Like, I don't know, it's like there's something wrong with their brain where they're not reflexively obedient, and they are like raising observations and asking questions and not just fall. It's like, you know what's weird? It's like, why aren't they following the platitudes? It's like they didn't like swallow it. It's like they just kind of like are chewing it forever and talking about it every aspect, and talking about how the test isn't diagnostic, and how COVID hasn't been isolated, and how all of these rules are, they always use the word draconian. It's like, I don't know. So it's pretty hard to talk to them when you're just a little bit, when you're just kind of more of a normal person that's not selfish and not stupid and not evil, you know? So I wish you the best, because it's really tough. It's tough to talk to these kind of people. They're so brainwashed, you know?